Well, welcome to week 2 of our Reading the Bible in 6 months. After meeting with a group this morning, there was kind of interesting their observations about how God doesn't work with perfect people. He works with families that are have bliss at some times and strife at other times. So something that's common to us even today. We continue to have family fights. It's almost like the Bible reads sometimes like a tabloid magazine, which invites you into the story with kind of the titillation. It was also interesting how you have it's like two different people telling the story, and that is the tradition that there's a priestly line to the story, and there's a group called the Yahwehists who believe more about the relationship with God. And so their stories are more relational, where the priestly ones have a lot of order. And it's very interesting how God plays, or people play favorites, and it feels like God plays favorites at times too. And it also was noted about the covenants. We've got the covenant with Noah, the covenant with Abraham, and how God is always making these promises. And God lets us know that with these promises there are some expectations, and often there is punishment or correction, but it also includes forgiveness in the end. So hopefully we learn from our mistakes. As you go into the new week, you'll be finishing up Genesis, and I would have you note how the story with Joseph and his family is resolved. And at the end of Genesis, the message you're left with, a message of forgiveness and God's intervention in preparing this group. And then in the beginning of Exodus, how it is that in a very quick time, things change, and why it is that the family of Israel is blessed by God, but it seems like cursed by people on earth. And how it is then that God goes about bringing his people home through the man Moses, and looking at Moses' story and his calling is always an interesting thing to look at. Plus also making sure to, when you go through the plagues, to see how the power struggle happens between God and Pharaoh. In Matthew's Gospel, as you saw last week, you started with that genealogy that made that connection to the Old Testament, and the story of Jesus' birth, where Joseph is very active in the story, and the powers of the earth going, the world going against them, and how they are warned and go to Egypt, that place where it seems to be a place of safety for God's people, but then God calls them out because of the threat. And also how Jesus at the beginning in chapter 6, the Sermon on the Mount, he sets forth from the time of his baptism through that sermon what it is he is about and what he's going to do. And as you read this week, you will start to see that promise of Jesus and his work become his words becoming his work. And so I invite you, as you read those things, to look for that Old Testament, those words like thus to be fulfilled, so this prophecy was fulfilled. You'll be hearing that story. And also in Jesus' birth story, one of the interesting things is it is the wise men who represent the world coming to seek out Jesus. So look for that also, that Jesus is not just promised for the Jews, but like in Abraham's blessing, the covenant made with Abraham, I am going to bless you so that you may bless others. See how that blessing evolves. I invite you to continue to just have fun and see what other little gems you find now that you have a little more life experience, and read things a little deeper than you would if it was a Sunday school lesson. God's blessing on your reading this week, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.